Hello and a big warm welcome to you. My name is Marion Rose, PhD, and today I have Aletha Solter, also PhD. She is the founder of the Aware Parenting Institute and the author of 5 books, and they have been translated into 13 languages. Not all of them, but a lot of them.
Actually 17 languages.
17, it's gone up.
17, I counted. And one or more of them has been translated into 17 languages. Yeah.
That's amazing.
Yay.
Yeah. So welcome, Aletha. I'm so happy to be having another conversation with you today.
Yeah, it's always nice. I always enjoy talking with you.
Thank you. That's such a... I'm so happy hearing that. So today we're going to talk about something that is so big for parents, I think, isn't it? Probably maybe one of the biggest, along with maybe discipline, sleep.
Yeah, sleep.
Big topic, isn't it? So I wondered how it would be to start to talk about, I think often parents think there are kind of almost like 2 broad options. They either kind of put up with frequent night waking for 3 years or so, or they need to resort to some form of controlled crying or cry out or self-soothing. And what I love about aware parenting is, to me, it really seems it's like, I call it the third way. And I wonder if you'd explain a little bit about why it's the third way, why it's a different option to these other 2.
Yeah. Well, it's totally different from those other 2. We don't, with what I call the crying in arms approach, we don't leave the baby alone, but we don't stop the crying. So it's kind of a both, but the best of both. That's how I see it. Yes. There is a need to cry to release stress, to release tensions. That's very beneficial, but crying alone is not helpful. Yes. So we can hold our babies and just let them cry in arms, and that helps them sleep better.
Yes.
Yeah.
It's such an amazing thing, isn't it? Because I think, again, what I love about aware parenting is often, again, a lot of other paradigms seem to either fall into try and do everything we can to meet a baby or child's needs, but ignore our own needs as parents, or try and do everything we can to meet our own needs as parents, but maybe not so much caring about or considering the needs of babies and children. And again, I love with this approach, we get to have a restful night's sleep early in the peak, and our babies get to be securely attached and also have sleep and get to express their feelings. So it's a wonderful thing, isn't it, that everyone gets the needs.
It meets everybody's needs, exactly. And nobody gets left out. Nobody has to suffer. Yeah. Yeah.
So do you want to talk a little bit about what is happening from an aware parenting perspective? What's going on in controlled crying or cry out, or you call it cry out in the States?
In the US, we call it the cry it out approach. And I know in UK and Australia, it's the controlled crying. Basically, it means leaving babies alone when they're crying, not picking them up, just ignoring them for a long time. 2, 3 minutes, 5 minutes. There's different systems, but what I worry about, and I don't want anyone to feel guilty if they've done that. All the parents out there, if you've done this approach, please don't feel guilty. You were doing your best thinking at the time. I did it. I confess. I let my son cry alone. Someone convinced me that would solve his night waking problem, and I feel very guilty about that. But he's fine. He's fine. and we can always repair these kinds of mistakes. That's the good thing about this approach. Yes. So, but what I worry about when we ignore babies when they're crying, I worry that they're going to lose their sense of trust. They're going to become terrified. They're going to really get incorrect information about themselves. They're going to think nobody loves them when they're crying. They're going to think we don't care about them. And studies have shown that it does increase stress, that the cortisol levels, when babies are left alone, their cortisol levels are high, and that's a measure of stress. So it is worrisome to leave babies alone when they're crying.
Yeah,
it's not what I recommend. Yeah.
I really hear that. And what I think I learned this piece from you is really that babies who are left alone to cry in those ways do actually still keep on waking, but they usually turn to whatever it is that they've learnt to hold in those feelings. Maybe it's sucking their thumb or clutching a blanket or a soft toy. So they are actually still waking, but they've learnt to, on their own, repress feelings that are showing up at those times.
Right. And people call that self-soothing, and some people think that's good, but it's not necessarily a good thing, because they're not getting that connection with us, and they're still needing to cry, and they're, it just doesn't meet their needs, this approach. Again, don't want anyone to feel guilty.
I love that. It's never, I love that from you. It's never too late to repair. So parents who are watching, listening, have done that. It's really possible, as you did with your son, to repair. And yes. And in terms of the other side, maybe babies or toddlers or 3-year-olds or 4-year-olds that are still waking frequently at night, from an aware parenting perspective, would you like to explain a bit about what's happening there?
Well, what the most likely thing that's going on is probably that they just need to cry more in arms, that they've maybe they're used to being put to sleep with some kind of soothing, either feed breastfeeding, nurse sucking, either some kind of rocking movement, all these things that we feel we have to do to calm babies down. And they haven't had a chance to use the natural physiological calming mechanism, which is releasing stress by crying in arms. So that's the natural way we relax. And these, what I think is more artificial calming methods, they usually don't work for more than an hour or two, a couple hours, and that's when the next waking up happens. They do put babies into a calm state, but it's temporary. It's temporary.
And what I love how aware parenting just makes so much sense, doesn't it? It's really logical and rational that, when babies or toddlers or children enter a more light state of sleep, then the feelings that are still there, that we've used kind of ways to repress those feelings bubble up again. Whereas when we support them in expressing those feelings within our loving arms, using that lovely natural relaxation mechanism, then those feelings have actually left their body. So they actually feel naturally relaxed, don't they, rather than kind of more repressed relaxed.
Right, and they sleep longer stretches at night.
Yes.
Yeah.
It's a very, very different way. Do you know what I also love about it? I also love, with aware parenting, you talk a lot about really trusting babies and children, that they know how to heal, they know how to express feelings. And I think we often think we need to do things to them, so we need to do things to them to help them calm down. But they know how to feel relaxed, they know how to laugh, they know how to cry in our loving arms, they know how to have tantrums, but we need to do things to help them feel relaxed. But they have.
Yeah, we tend to feel that often, forgetting that they do know how. So I think of it as letting a child fall asleep rather than putting a child to sleep. It's a slightly different way of saying it, which helps explain this approach.
Yeah, it's often interesting with the terminology we have around sleep. I know in England they talk a lot about putting a child down to sleep. There's a lot of interesting words that get used, isn't it?
Yeah.
What did we have as another question? Do you want to say a little bit about co-sleeping and children having closeness when they're falling asleep?
Yeah, well, that's a huge need, and I think it's probably wired in biologically. We're mammals. Our children are mammals. we mustn't forget that. So, as far as I know, all land mammals, the young sleep next to their mothers, and this is for warmth, protection, nourishment, and I don't think the human species is any different from other mammals in that sense. So I do think that babies need closeness while falling asleep during the night. If that works for families to some form of co-sleeping, I highly recommend it. I'm not militant about it. I will support parents who prefer to put their babies in a crib or a cot, you'd say. But I do recommend closeness at night. and while falling asleep. I tell them if they use a crib or a cot to at least hold them until they're asleep, and then don't ignore them during the night if they should wake up.
Yeah, and as you say, again, because aware parenting is about meeting everyone's needs. So if parents have really big, strong feelings or beliefs around not doing that, it's finding ways. How can everyone get their needs met? So,
right.
And I love the piece really from aware parenting that babies and children need 3 things, and probably adults too, but we need to feel tired, connected, and relaxed, which is the 3 pieces that we're talking about here, isn't it?
Right. Tired, sleepy. Baby's not going to fall asleep if they're not sleepy, and they need to feel connected. Yeah, I like those 3 things, the way you say it. And relax, that means free of stress. Yeah. Which brings and then, carry on. Right, and then baby will fall asleep.
And as we talked about at the beginning there, we can do things to help them feel relaxed, but those tend to be more kind of sitting on the outside forms of relaxation, whereas the more we can cooperate with their natural relaxation mechanisms,
right,
the more that relaxation is from within. It's a true relaxation in the whole.
Authentic relaxation.
Pardon?
Authentic, true, real relaxation that comes from having released tensions.
Yes, and I'm sure we can all connect to that feeling in ourselves, can't we? That feeling when you just feel so relaxed, maybe you've had a big laugh or big cry to a friend or a partner, and that it's a whole body experience, isn't it? Like so relaxed, we just want to go to sleep.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
So I know some of these are going to be repeating what we said, but so in terms of babies getting what might be called fussy, again, I think you call that fussy in the States, or settled. It's often called the witching hour, isn't it? So what's going on there in the evenings, and what can parents do to help promote restful sleep when the babies or toddlers get fussy?
Yeah, well, fussiness, and it does often come late afternoon, evening, that could be just a buildup of tensions from the day. It could be a need to cry. And when babies get sleepy later in the day, it's harder to repress emotions. So these emotions tend to start bubbling up, wanting to come out, wanting to, I think of it as bubbling up. Okay. And that's why, that could be why we see these fussy periods that used to be called colicky periods. So a sleepy baby who doesn't have pent-up stress will fall asleep. A sleepy baby, but who has some pent-up stress, may need to cry in arms before falling asleep. Yeah.
Again, it's a very different approach, isn't it? I think a lot of behaviour, as you talk about so beautifully in the Aware Baby in particular, is people view it as symptoms of tiredness rather than it's the tiredness that's allowing those feelings to bubble up.
Right. Yeah.
And then people will often try to get the babies or the children to sleep really quickly because this is a symptom of tiredness rather than allow the feelings to bubble out so they can naturally fall asleep. Yeah.
Right.
So what about attachment play? You've got your amazing book, Attachment Play. What about, how is that helpful before bedtimes? And what's going on when children get really playful or silly right before bed?
Okay. So we're talking about little older babies, toddlers, young children now. Attachment play can be very helpful at bedtime. It can help connect, that's the basic, some need for connection. If you've been away from your child all day, the child's been to school or daycare, it's a wonderful way to connect. Just anything like telling a cooperative story together, that's all part of attachment play. Activities with body contact, a back rub. But then there's the laughter play too, which can be really helpful. Let's say your child is just not wanting to get ready for bed and not wanting to brush teeth and not wanting to put pajamas on. And we can do nonsense, silly play. We can pretend that, it's time to brush your toes. Oh, I mean your teeth. So, just kind of be silly about it all, get them laughing. Yes. And that can release tensions, and it can really help and stimulate them to want to be more cooperative because they're going to be laughing and releasing anxieties, tensions, stress, whatever it is. Most of the time we don't even know what these stresses are that are getting released. It's just buildup from the day and frustrations and little upsets and anxieties.
Yeah. And
then there's children who are really, some children tend to get really hyperactive when they're sleepy, and that's a bit confusing. Seems to be a lot of nervous energy. It's not real genuine energy. It's just kind of nervous energy. They're wired, and they are sleepy. But again, it's emotions need to come out first. And we can help them with that by doing maybe a power reversal game, pillow fight, let them knock us down with a pillow, do games that get them to laugh. But I don't recommend active play times at bedtime unless the child is already acting, agitated or hyper. Yeah.
Again,
you have anything to add about that?
Yeah, well, again, what I love about your approach is that it's really trusting the child, isn't it? If the child's being silly, like, they intrinsically know that they need some nonsense play, so we join in and being goofy. Sorry about my dog in the background, if you can hear that. Or if they're being kind of that hyper, then really seeing that they're needing power reversal games, that kind of thing. It's really trusting children, isn't it? They know what they need, and often, again, we try to kind of coerce them into being calm and cooperative. But actually, when we understand what their behaviour is telling us and we cooperate, then they can actually fall asleep. I love that.
Yeah. Oh, and there's also sometimes fears come up at bedtime, especially if the child knows you're going to leave after they're asleep, if they're sleeping alone in a room, if they're old enough for that and willing to do that. But sometimes fears come up around that, knowing that we're going to be out of the room for all night or for an hour or two or whatever. So some kind of symbolic play around the fears can help with that. Just they think there's a monster under the bed. We can play with monster puppets and say, just get them to laugh a little bit and pretend to be a monster that's scared of them, or that kind of play can help children with bedtime fears. So there's a lot that we can do with play at bedtime.
And you talked so beautifully and clearly in your book, Attach and Play, on all of these different things, specific games that we can play to help children in all these different situations. I often say, parents will often say, my baby or my child fights sleep. And I often say, I think it's actually just us fighting their natural relaxation mechanism. That's what's really going on.
I like that. We're fighting against something. And sometimes just going with the flow, going with what the child is showing they need to do is what works.
So lovely. So lovely. And it's kind of a relief, isn't it? We can actually go with that rather than fight against that.
and it actually they actually end up going to sleep sooner than if we keep resisting. That's what I found with my children.
Yeah. I often talk about, I don't know if you know the yin and yang symbol, the black and the white.
Oh, yeah.
And I often think, if we try and get our children to feel relaxed, then that leads to them being wakeful. Whereas if we go with that, the cry or the play or the rambunctiousness, the big cry, the tantrum, then they can actually go into natural relaxation and have a nice, relaxed, restful sleep.
Right. That made me think of another important aspect of bedtime. If we ourselves are stressed, anxious, anything, any kind of very frustrated, maybe not even with them, but just with our life, they're going to sense that. And especially, and this is from birth on, our babies aren't going to be able to relax easily if they pick up on our stress. So that's another important thing. We need to find ways to relax ourselves, have a good cry, but also just calming our minds. There's techniques for that. Just while we're putting our baby to bed, our children to bed, it can help.
Yeah, and again, I think so important. Part of your work is really the importance of doing our own self-care, our own listening to our feelings, our own issues that come up. So important, isn't it?
Yeah.
How are we doing for time? I think we've pretty much talked most. I'd love to just talk that to the last one. You've talked in a different conversation about the joy of helping parents in consultations around sleep.
Yes.
Do you want to say just a little bit about what you see happens for those parents and their babies or children?
Yeah, well, the reason I like that, it's so rewarding for me, is because often there is progress pretty quickly.
Yes.
When the parents implement this approach. And one thing that I find where parents get stuck, and where I try to help, some parents get stuck in thinking that it has to be the mother who puts the child to bed, or the baby to bed, who does bedtime.
Yeah.
And it doesn't have to be the mother. When it's past the newborn period, obviously the mother needs to breastfeed and the father can't do that. But, after about a few weeks, 4, 6, or a few months, or some mothers get in the habit of just nursing their babies to sleep, and thinking it has to be them because that's the only way the baby will fall asleep. And that's an age where I recommend then you can nurse your baby a little earlier in the evening, then do a story, and then let your partner, let the non-nursing partner take over, okay? And that's kind of that sometimes produces a huge, wonderful breakthrough for families, because they realize, oh, someone else can do this, if they don't need to be fed to sleep, breastfed, they don't need to suck to sleep, it can be the other parent. And that has been really helpful. So that's what I see. I frequently give that advice. And some others are resistant and think it has to be them. Yeah. But doesn't my baby need me? Yes, of course their babies need their mother, but they also need their fathers, whoever the other parent is. Yes. And that can really strengthen the relationship with the non-nursing partner. Yes. And that it really has good results.
Yeah. It's so amazing. And for all age children as well, isn't it? This isn't just for babies. And again, it's what I love about aware parenting rather than what I call classical attachment parenting, is it's often brings in the dad or the non-nursing partner. If it's two mums or moms, right. It really, it means it can be so much more of an equal.
Yes, exactly.
Wonderful for the other parent, isn't it? That they can do.
Right. Right. And I know families now who do aware parenting from the birth of their child, and right from the start, the two parents take turns putting the baby to bed from very early. Yes. And these children get to be toddlers, and they're perfectly happy with either parent putting them to bed. I've heard 2-year-olds say, "Whose turn is it to put me to bed tonight?" Perfectly happy with either parent. And I think that's lovely.
Wonderful, isn't it? And then, of course, for the nursing or the breastfeeding mum or parent, then there's more likely to be more rest and more time to fill her own cup. So it's just, and again, another way to meet everyone's needs. The baby child gets to express their feelings and be with dad or other mum. Yeah. Everyone gets their needs met. So.
And the non-nursing partner often feels left out in the relationship and feels like there's nothing they can do, there's no role for them, but there is.
Yes. Yeah. So wonderful. So is there anything else you wanted to say around sleep? I know we've
so yeah, I think we've covered pretty much everything. I like your 3 things. Babies need closeness, connection. Babies need to feel sleepy, or children, and they need to be free of tensions, to be relaxed. Yeah. 3 things to keep in mind.
Yes, and so helpful. I always like lists, and I love your work. There's so many lists of 3 that I find so helpful to remember. So thank you. So if people are new to your work, where can they find out more about what you do?
My website, awareparenting.com. My 5 books. The sleep is I talk about sleep in mostly in the Aware Baby, some in Tears and Tantrums. Well, actually, in all my books, actually. But what we've been focusing on is the Aware Baby and Tears and Tantrums, and attachment play, that play aspect. Yeah.
Wonderful. Thank you so much. It's so enjoyable. And if people want to find out more about my work, my website's marianrose.net. And yeah, it's so lovely to talk to you, Aletha. I so appreciate your work. And really, you know, from the parents that I've worked with around sleep, the transformation that comes to know that we really don't need to have endless night waking for 3 or 4 years, or to resort to feeling so desperate and resorting to leaving our babies in ways that aren't so helpful. And again, to really remind everyone who's watching or listening, it really is never too late to change. We can shift things, we can catch up on past feelings. So yeah,
and repair our mistakes.
we can.
Yeah,
It's so wonderful.
Interactive repair, I think of it as.
So thank you again, and I look forward to our next conversation.
So do I.
Bye, Aletha.
Bye.
I'm going to stop recording.